Okay, this is for your Chapter 8 study guide to review, and your test is either going to be on January 11th or 12th, depending on what class you're in. So let's get started. So here are some memes to inspire you. I don't always watch the study guide Herb puts up, but when I do, I know I'm like an A. Oh, you're not going to study for your test? Let me know how being grounded will work out. And this one, you said I studied for the test based on your grade. The lie detector said that was a lie. So these are things that we're trying to avoid, these two right here, and we're trying to get into this one. So let's get started. Question 1 on your study guide says, what are the 3 items that make up ATP? That is adenine, ribose, and the 3 phosphate groups. We have T, which stands for the triphosphate. So we have adenine, ribose, and the 3 phosphate groups. All right, number 2. So how exactly is energy released from ATP? It's when a phosphate group is removed. So here we have ATP, the adenine, the ribose, and the 3 phosphate groups. And when the bond is broken between the 2nd and 3rd phosphate group, and this one here is removed, the energy is released. All right, number 3, what is the scientific name for organisms that make their own food? You should already know this, and you should be able to think of the answer right away. Well, that is an autotroph, and auto part being the giveaway since they automatically create their own food. And those are plants that do photosynthesis. Moving along with number 4, what is a heterotroph, and do they generate their own foods? Is a mushroom a plant? Now, this second part may seem a little off from this one, but we'll talk about how they're related. So a heterotroph does not create their own food. They eat other organisms. And now, since a mushroom is not a plant and instead of fungi, it's not an autotroph. So plants make their own food. Mushrooms do not, because they're not a plant, they're a fungi, and because they're breaking down things, they're detritivores or decomposers. All right, number 5. Plants get the energy they need for photosynthesis by absorbing what? This is a pretty easy question. They do it by absorbing energy from the sun. Number 6. Why do most plants appear green in color? They're every other color but green, and that is because they reflect green light and absorb all the other colors. Another way of saying this is because they are reflecting green light, they're not absorbing green light, they're reflecting it. All right, number 7. Inside chloroplast, you find thylakoids and granum. In relation to these 2 items, where would you find the stroma? Would that be inside or outside the thylakoids and the granum? Well, the stroma is outside the thylakoids. It is the open space. Now, the granum are stacks of thylakoids. You may be saying, I have no idea what that means. Well, take a look at this picture. So here, all these individual pieces that we have stacked right here, all the individual pieces are thylakoids. Now, they're arranged in stacks, and the stacks are called granum. So this entire stack here, this entire stack, all these stacks inside are called granum. Now, if you look closely, you'll see this open space here. Everywhere you see the open space, that is the stroma. All right, number 8. Where inside the chloroplast would you find the chlorophyll? Well, that's inside the thylakoid membrane. So here we have these individual pieces, and you can see the thylakoid membrane here on the outside. That is where you're going to find the chlorophyll. All right, so right here in the thylakoid membrane. Number 9. What does NADP positive do in relation to electrons? Very easy question here. It's an electron carrier. It carries electrons. Pretty simple. All right, number 10. Plants use sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into what? Oxygen and high energy sugars. On your study guide, make sure number 10 reads, plants use sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into what? I think there was a typo where it says convert sugar and carbon dioxide into what? That needs to change to water. So make sure in number 10, you rewrite it so it reads exactly as what you see here. Number 11, where do light-dependent reactions take place, and what are the products of the light-dependent reactions? Okay, so they take place within the thylakoid membranes. That's where the light-dependent reactions take place. Light-dependent is dependent upon light. Well, you have to ask yourself, what absorbs light? Chlorophyll absorbs light. Well, where's the chlorophyll? That's inside the thylakoid membrane. So if you're wondering how in the world we got to this answer, following these steps, that's how we got to it. Now, the products, because don't forget the second part, it asks the products of the light-dependent reactions. That's going to be ATP, NADPH, and oxygen gas. Now, the NADPH tells us that the NADP plus has already picked up those 2 high-energy electrons and the hydrogen ion, in case you're wondering where that has come into play. All right, moving on. Number 12, where would a person find photosystem 1? Where would a person find photosystem 2? Well, think about what photo means. Photo means light. Well, what part of the plant absorbs light? Chlorophyll. Where do you find chlorophyll? Inside the thylakoid membrane. So looking just like we did on number 11, just following the steps. Number 13, what happens within the stroma? Well, the Calvin cycle produces sugar. That's what happens inside the stroma. That's not the only thing that happens, but that's what we need to know for our test, is that the Calvin cycle produces sugar. All right, number 14, what type of light reaction is the Calvin cycle known as? So is that light independent or light dependent? And that is light independent. You do not need light for the Calvin cycle to take place. Now, it can take place inside the light, but it does not need light. 15, know how ATP synthesis change ADP to ATP. So there's a couple things you need to know here. When a hydrogen ion passes through the thylakoid membrane, that is how the ATP synthesis change ADP to ATP. It's with this statement right here. Now, with this information, we can also make the following statement. A membrane protein called ATP synthase, because that's what ATP synthase is a membrane protein, allows H+ ions, that's this part right here, to pass through the thylakoid membrane, that's this part right here, and into the stroma. Number 16, what are pigments and what do they do? It is what plants use to gather energy. The principal pigment used to gather energy is chlorophyll in plants. All right, number 17, getting close to the end. Given a diagram, determine what a thylakoid is and what a stroma is. So this is a diagram. It's very similar to what will be on your test. Not the exact diagram, but it'll be very, very similar. So the thylakoids, remember, are the individual pieces, and the stroma are the open space. And just to review, the granum are the stacks of thylakoids. Number 18, what is the role of electron carriers and what is an example? Well, this is a dead giveaway. The role of electron carriers is to carry electrons, those high energy electrons, and the example is NADP+. Number 19, describe the relationship between light independent and light dependent reactions. In other words, how do they work together? Well, the light dependent reactions use energy from the sun to produce ATP and NADPH. Now that's the light dependent reactions, and the NADPH has picked up those high energy electrons and that hydrogen. Now you have to use ATP and NADPH, which was made in the sunlight, to do the following. All right, you can think of this as a tools being made. Well, you're going to take the tools being made, ATP and NADPH, and the light independent reactions are going to use the ATP and NADPH to produce high energy sugars. All right, you can think of this as the tools are being used. So in the light dependent, where the sun is, you're going to produce ATP and NADPH. You're making those tools. And in the light independent reactions, you're going to use those tools that you just made, ATP and NADPH, from the light dependent reactions. That's where it came from. And we're going to make high energy sugars. So the tools are being used. Number 20, what are the three factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis? So it's the availability of water, light intensity, and temperature. Now, Sunday, it was freezing outside. Photosynthesis most likely slowed, and in some places, it probably stopped completely. Number 21, just two questions left. If a plant is in water and bubbles are given off, what are those bubbles made of? And why is that? Well, the bubbles would be made of oxygen. This is because plants give off oxygen as a byproduct for photosynthesis. So here we have a picture. We have a water plant inside this contraption here filled with water, and we see some air bubbles. But because we know during photosynthesis plants give off water, we know it's going to be made of oxygen, these bubbles. And the last one, number 22. I know it says 21, but it should say 22. If we were moving a plant farther away from a light source, would there be more or less light intensity? And how would this light intensity affect photosynthesis? Well, if we're moving it away, there would be less light if we were moving the plant away from the light source. And this would ultimately slow down photosynthesis, but still not stop it since it's still receiving the sunlight. If you have any questions, text me on Remind. This will be up until our test is over. I need you not to let me down and make an A. And we'll see you guys in class when you show up to